The scent of yerba mate still lingered in the air when the screams stopped. In the subterranean galleries of Sugarloaf Mountain, where tourists were never meant to tread, an entire family had become a silent echo. 90 days later, when the rainwater finally receded, someone would discover that some tours in Rio de Janeiro come at a much higher price than expected. This is a story that began with smiles and ended in concrete depths where no one should ever be. The morning of June 21st, 2014 dawned clear over Vermelha Beach. Eduardo Nunes adjusted a leather mate pouch over his shoulder and gazed at Sugarloaf Mountain, a stark silhouette against the blue winter sky. At 40, a maintenance technician from Porto Alegre, he had saved for months to bring his family to Rio. Patrícia, his 38-year-old wife and an administrative assistant at the same company, held 8-year-old Lia's hand, while 12-year-old Bruno, with the boundless curiosity of his age, had already run ahead. Their 2008 silver sedan, with its Porto Alegre license plate, had been parked on Urca Street since early morning. Eduardo had always been meticulous about schedules, and this Saturday would be no different. The vacation had been planned down to the smallest detail. 3 days in Rio with the Sugarloaf cable car as the main event. The children had been talking about it for weeks. "Dad, how many meters high is it again?" Bruno asked, pointing to the rocky peak that rose majestically before them. Eduardo smiled, answering with his usual patience as Patrícia rummaged through her bag, checking for the camera. Lia skipped on the sidewalk, mesmerized by the cable cars gliding along their suspended cobbles. The Vermelha Beach station was just beginning to welcome the first tourists of the day. Eduardo took the gourd and straw from his leather pouch, serving the traditional chimarrão to Patrícia. The gaucho ritual drew smiles from other visitors who recognized the custom from the south. Bruno and Lia watched the uniformed employees preparing the cable cars for operation. "Mom, are we really going all the way up there?" Lia asked, her voice a mixture of excitement and fear. Patrícia stroked her daughter's hair and explained the ride, trying to soothe her nerves. Eduardo put the gourd away and checked the tickets he had bought online in advance. The crowd at the station was gradually growing. Families, couples, and groups of friends milled near the boarding platform. Eduardo wore a blue-striped shirt, a discreet nod to his soccer team, Grêmio, without any official logos. Patrícia wore a red shirt, a subtle reminder of their rival, Internacional, also unmarked. Bruno had on his favorite blue jacket, while Lia had chosen the pink t-shirt she'd received for her birthday. The smell of the sea mingled with the aroma of yerba mate that still clung to the leather pouch. Eduardo always brought his chimarrão on trips, a piece of his gaucho heritage wherever he went. Patrícia was used to this habit and to the curious glances it drew. While they waited outside the station, Eduardo explained to the children how the aerial cable system worked. Bruno asked technical questions, fascinated by the mechanics, while Lia was content to watch the people around them. Patrícia captured these spontaneous moments with her camera, creating memories she believed would last forever. The sea breeze gently swayed the cable car lines. Eduardo adjusted the pouch on his shoulder again and checked his watch. They still had time. The family found a spot near a wooden deck that offered a privileged view of Guanabara Bay. There, unknowingly, they would capture the last happy image anyone would ever have of them. Patrícia held her phone at the perfect height and told everyone to get in position. The wooden deck was the perfect setting, the imposing Sugarloaf in the background, the cable cars suspended in the air, and Guanabara Bay stretching to the horizon. Eduardo stood on the left, the leather pouch slung across his chest, a natural smile on his face. Bruno stood next to his father, his blue jacket a stark contrast to the bright morning sky. Patrícia placed herself in the center, hugging Lia, who beamed in her pink shirt. The family looked relaxed, genuinely happy in the moment they had so carefully planned. "Everyone together now," Patrícia said, setting the phone's timer. They had only a few seconds to arrange themselves. Eduardo put his arm around Bruno's shoulders while Patrícia held Lia by the waist. The click captured a moment of pure family joy against the iconic Rio postcard. Checking the photo, Patrícia smiled. It was perfect. The vibrant colors of their clothes stood out against the natural landscape, and everyone wore a joyful expression. Eduardo asked to see it and praised the result. Lia wanted a look too, giggling when she saw herself on the screen. After the photo, the family walked toward the station's main entrance. The crowd had grown considerably, with lines forming near the ticket counters. Eduardo checked their tickets again, mentally calculating the wait time. Bruno watched the cable cars, captivated by their engineering. Lia stayed close to her parents, a little intimidated by the crowd. Eduardo explained that soon they would be at the top, enjoying one of the most famous views in the world. It was then that two men approached them near the side of the station. They wore polo shirts with ID badges hanging from their necks, giving them an official air. The first, taller and with a mustache, spoke with an easy confidence and technical knowledge of the facilities. The second, younger and thinner, added details about the cable car's inner workings. "You're the family from the south, right?" the man with the mustache asked, gesturing discreetly to Eduardo and Patrícia's shirts. "Would you like a look at the technical side of things before you go up? We can offer a quick tour through the maintenance corridors. No lines, no extra cost." Eduardo and Patrícia exchanged a look. The younger man explained it was a special tour for families interested in the station's mechanics. It would be quick, just 15 minutes, and then they could board the cable car as normal. "Is it safe for the children?" Patrícia asked, with a mother's natural concern. The man with the mustache assured her it was. It was a technical area, he explained, but perfectly safe and well lit. Bruno's interest was immediate, thrilled by the chance to see what other tourists couldn't. The men showed their badges, though the details were hard to read from a distance. They spoke with authority about hydraulic systems and preventative maintenance, impressing Eduardo, who worked in the same field. "My kids would love to see that," Eduardo said, making the decision. Patrícia hesitated, but Bruno's excitement and the promise of a short tour convinced her. The men led them to a side door, far less crowded than the main entrance. As they moved away from the main concourse, the crowds thinned. The side door opened into a narrow corridor with concrete walls and artificial lighting. The men continued their technical explanations, maintaining a professional and reassuring tone. Patrícia glanced back one last time, seeing the normal bustle of tourists on the main platform. She expected to be back with her family in a few minutes. Ready to board the cable car, she had no idea it would be the last time anyone would see them in a public area of Sugarloaf Mountain. The service corridor was narrower than Eduardo had imagined. The concrete walls echoed their footsteps as they followed the two men down a passage that gradually constricted. The artificial light cast long shadows, and the smell of dampness grew stronger the deeper they went into the structure. Bruno walked just behind the impromptu guides, asking questions about the electrical and mechanical systems. The man with the mustache answered with convincing technical details, citing voltages, load capacities, and safety procedures that impressed the boy. Eduardo nodded along, recognizing the professional jargon. Patrícia kept Lia close, noticing the girl had grown quieter since they entered the corridor. The absence of the station's ambient sounds created a different atmosphere, enclosed and silent. Only their voices and their footsteps on the concrete floor filled the space. "The main control room is just ahead," the younger man explained, pointing down a hall that disappeared into the gloom. It's where we monitor all the cable cars in real time. Eduardo adjusted the leather pouch on his shoulder, the weight of the gourd and straw inside swinging gently as he walked. The strap felt slightly damp from the humidity. He'd noticed the temperature was several degrees cooler in here, typical of a space with no natural ventilation. Lia whispered something to Patrícia, who leaned down to listen. The girl wanted to know when they would go back to see the real cable car. Patrícia reassured her it would only be a little longer. The corridor curved gently to the right, revealing new passages branching off in different directions. The men seemed to know the way perfectly, never hesitating. "How many people work down here?" Bruno asked. The man with the mustache explained there were maintenance shifts and that not all areas were occupied at once. Some sectors only saw staff during scheduled inspections or emergencies. Patrícia began to feel the tour was lasting longer than the promised 15 minutes. She discreetly checked her watch and realized they had walked quite a distance from the entrance. The lack of windows or any external reference made it hard to know where they were. A heavy access door appeared ahead, partially ajar. The men explained they had to pass through it to reach the control room. Beyond the door, the area was darker. The lights were sparser and the humidity seemed to intensify. Lia squeezed Patrícia's hand tighter. "The control room is right there," the younger man said, gesturing toward a direction that wasn't clearly visible in the poor light. "Just down a few more meters." Eduardo felt a faint sense of unease, but the men's technical language remained convincing. Patrícia felt a chill as she realized she could no longer hear any sounds from the main station. The silence of the tunnel was broken only by their own voices and the distant hum of some unseen machinery. "Daddy, can't we go back now?" Lia asked, her voice small but audible in the quiet corridor. Eduardo looked at Patrícia, a shared concern passing between them. The men seemed to hear the girl's question but kept walking. The man with the mustache turned back briefly and smiled. "Almost there. You're about to see something no other tourist gets to see." His words, meant to be reassuring, struck an odd note with Eduardo. There was something in his tone that didn't match the professional courtesy he had shown earlier. The heavy door swung shut behind them with a metallic clang. Eduardo turned instinctively, but the younger man was already positioned near it, explaining it was standard procedure to maintain the temperature in the technical corridors. The explanation seemed plausible, but a growing discomfort settled in the pit of Eduardo's stomach. Patrícia noticed Lia had started to tremble slightly. The air was colder here, and the dampness created a clammy feeling on their skin. The leather of Eduardo's pouch absorbed the moisture, making the strap feel heavier on his shoulder. The scent of yerba mate from the gourd now mingled with the odor of wet concrete. "Where are we exactly in relation to the main station?" Eduardo asked, trying to keep his tone casual. The younger man pointed vaguely, explaining they were a few meters below the boarding platform. The answer wasn't clear, but Eduardo decided not to press the point. Lia whispered to Patrícia that she had to use the bathroom. The mother glanced around, searching for any sign of a restroom, but there was nothing visible in the corridor where they stood. She asked the men about the facilities, but their answer was evasive. Something about it being just a little further ahead without specifying exactly where. They walked on for several more meters until they reached a wider area. Here there was equipment that Eduardo couldn't clearly identify in the precarious light. Pipes of varying diameters ran along the walls and across the ceiling, creating a labyrinth of installations that seemed to legitimize the technical nature of the place. Bruno approached an electrical panel, fascinated by its displays and indicators. The man with the mustache quickly pulled him away, explaining safety protocols and strict rules about touching the equipment. The reaction was too quick, sharper than necessary for a simple safety precaution. Patrícia felt that something was definitively wrong. The duration of their tour had far exceeded the promised 15 minutes, and they seemed to be moving deeper and deeper away from any public access areas. She tried to spot any official signage or identification for the maintenance company, but found nothing. "How much longer is this going to take?" Patrícia asked, her tone more direct this time. "Our children are tired and we want to get back to the cable car." The man with the mustache glanced at his companion before answering. The look lasted only a few seconds, but it was long enough to heighten Eduardo's growing unease. The leather mate bag began to slip from Eduardo's shoulder due to the humidity. He readjusted it, feeling the distributed weight of the gourd and straw shift slightly. The movement caught the younger man's eye, who observed the traditional accessory intently, as if memorizing its details. "The control room is right over there," the mustached man said, pointing to a passage that led to an even lower level. "We just need to go down a little further. That's where you'll see the heart of the operation." Eduardo noted that every little further took them progressively deeper into the subterranean structure. The sound was professional, but that specific sound in this increasingly claustrophobic environment took on a disturbing quality. The men exchanged another quick glance before gesturing toward the descent. Eduardo decided the time had come to end this visit. He took Bruno's hand and positioned himself beside Patrícia, creating a protective barrier around his children. The mate bag swung gently with the movement, producing the last familiar noise that would echo in those corridors. "I think we've seen enough," Eduardo said, his voice firm. "We want to go back now." It was then that the man with the mustache smiled, but it was no longer the professional smile they had seen at the station entrance. It was a different kind of smile, one that made Eduardo understand that his family had made a terrible mistake in trusting these strangers. The silence that followed Eduardo's words seemed to stretch for an eternity. The two men positioned themselves in a way that subtly blocked the path back, though they maintained a casual demeanor. The mustached man crossed his arms and leaned forward slightly, as if about to share an important secret. "Look, Eduardo," the man said, pronouncing the name even though no one had formally introduced themselves. "You've come all this way. It would be a shame to miss the most interesting part of the tour." A chill ran down Patrícia's spine as she realized they knew her husband's name. Eduardo instinctively pulled Bruno closer, while Patrícia did the same with Lia. The little girl had stopped whimpering and was now staring at the men with wide eyes, her childish instinct detecting the danger before her mind could fully process it. Her pink t-shirt seemed to have lost its brightness under the corridor's artificial light. "How do you know my name?" Eduardo asked, his voice carrying a firmness he did not feel inside. The leather mate bag slipped from his shoulder again, and this time he gripped it tightly, as if the familiar object could offer some protection against the rising sense of threat. The younger man let out a low chuckle, a sound that echoed ominously in the confined space. "We know a lot of things, Eduardo. We know you're from Porto Alegre, that you drive a 2008 silver sedan, that you're staying at the hotel in the South Zone." Each piece of information was like a precise blow, shattering the family's sense of security. Bruno tried to hide behind his father, finally understanding that this situation had turned into something far different from the promised technical tour. His blue jacket was slightly damp from the condensation in the underground environment. The boy who, minutes before, had been full of curious questions now stood in absolute silence. Patrícia tried to remain calm for the children's sake, but her voice trembled as she spoke. "We want to leave now. Please let us go back." The man with the mustache took a step forward, invading the family's personal space in a way that left no doubt about his intentions. "The problem is you've seen things you shouldn't have seen," the man explained with a disturbing calm. You've been to places where tourists aren't allowed. That creates a complicated situation for all of us. Eduardo understood then. This was no longer a misunderstanding or a case of unauthorized guides. The humidity in the corridor seemed to intensify, creating small beads of condensation that trickled down the concrete walls. The sound of the dripping water had become more audible, a sinister soundtrack to the unfolding conversation. Eduardo mentally calculated their chances of escape, but the men were strategically positioned. Lia finally let out a small, quiet sob which was enough to break Patricia's contained tension. "Please," the mother begged. "Our children haven't done anything wrong. They just wanted to see the cable car." Her words echoed in the corridor, revealing the desperation she was trying to control. The younger man discreetly checked his watch, as if following some kind of schedule. Eduardo noticed the movement and understood that this situation had been planned in advance. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was premeditated and organized. "You're going to have to come with us a little further," the man with the mustache said, his tone now devoid of any courtesy. "There's a place down here where you'll be staying for a while we sort some things out." The implied threat in his words made Eduardo tremble, not from cold, but from fear. "Dad," Bruno whispered, his voice barely audible, seeking a protection Eduardo wasn't sure he could provide. The boy's blue jacket was now visibly damp, and his sneakers made muffled sounds on the wet floor as he shifted nervously. Eduardo tried one last diplomatic approach. "Look, we won't tell anyone about this place. You can trust us. We just want to go back to our hotel with our children." But the words sounded desperate even to his own ears. The leather mate bag swung one last time as Eduardo moved to better shield his family. The scent of the mate herbs, which minutes ago had evoked the familiarity and comfort of home, now mixed with the damp, oppressive odor of the underground, creating a combination that would forever be associated with the moment their lives took an irreversible turn. The two men moved simultaneously, closing in on the family with a coordination that revealed experience in such situations. Eduardo squeezed Patricia's hand for a brief moment, a silent gesture of farewell that neither of them could bring themselves to verbalize. The hotel in the South Zone began to worry when the Nunes family did not return on Saturday night. Eduardo had made it clear at the reception that they would be back before dinner. Their 2008 silver sedan remained parked on Urca Street, accumulating parking tickets that would never be paid. On Sunday morning, June 22nd, the hotel management tried calling their phones without success. The calls went straight to voicemail. The family's luggage remained in their room with clothes laid out for 2 more days in Rio de Janeiro. Relatives in Porto Alegre grew alarmed when Eduardo missed his customary Sunday calls. His older brother Marcos Nunes tried to reach him several times before deciding to call the hotel. That's when he learned the family hadn't been seen since the previous morning. On Monday, June 23rd, Marcos boarded the first flight to Rio. At the Urca Civil Police Station, he filed a missing persons report providing all the information he had. On Tuesday, June 24th, the local press began reporting on the disappearance. The family photo from the station deck, the last image taken of them, was broadcast on the news. Eduardo's leather mate bag slung across his chest and the family's colorful shirts became familiar details to thousands of locals. Firefighters intensified their searches on the slopes and in the vegetation around the tourist complex. Marcos Nunes remained in Rio for the entire first week, personally overseeing the search. He described Eduardo as a responsible man who would never put his family, especially his children, in unnecessary danger. A week after the disappearance, the search expanded. The silver sedan was examined by forensics, but nothing of investigative value was found. In the second week of July, an anonymous call came into the police station. A male voice claimed to have seen the Nunes family talking to two men in plain clothes near the station, but hung up before providing more details. Security camera footage from the area was analyzed, but the quality and angles created blind spots in the investigation. In August, new searches were conducted in the technical and maintenance areas of the cable car complex, places not normally open to the public. All searches came up empty. The third week of August brought a disturbing discovery that would change the course of the investigation. During a routine check of local hardware stores, investigators found records of suspicious purchases made in the days immediately following the family's disappearance. On Monday, June 23rd, one day after they went missing, someone had bought 50 meters of industrial-grade metal strapping, the type used for securing heavy cargo. The purchase was made in cash at a store in Tijuca by a man who provided no identification. On Tuesday, June 24th, another store registered the sale of 2 rolls of corrosion-resistant metallic adhesive tape, ratchet-style fasteners, and nylon ropes. Again, a cash payment with no ID. The store clerk vaguely remembered an anxious man who seemed to be in a hurry. On Thursday, June 26th, a marine supply store in Copacabana sold 2 heavy-duty yellow industrial tarps, the kind used to cover truckloads. The buyer, described as a thin man of about 30, paid in cash and left quickly. Investigators began to cross-reference the physical descriptions of the buyers. Though vague, they pointed to at least 2 different men making coordinated purchases across the city, suggesting meticulous planning. At the same time, residents of Urca reported having seen suspicious activity near the cable car station during the early hours of Sunday, June 22nd. 2 figures had been seen carrying heavy objects toward the service areas of the complex, but the distance and poor lighting made a clear identification impossible. A local scrap collector working in the area claimed to have found remnants of metallic adhesive tape discarded near the station's storm drains. The material was collected for forensic analysis, revealing fabric fibers clinging to its sticky surface, fibers that could have come from clothing. The analysis identified elements consistent with cotton knit in blue, red, and pink. While not definitive proof, the colors perfectly matched the clothing the Nunes family was wearing on the day they disappeared. Investigators returned to the stores where the suspicious purchases had been made, this time armed with photo lineups of known criminals. At the shop in Tijuca, an employee recognized a man with reasonable certainty, a man with a police record for fraud and scams against tourists in the Urca region. His name was Gilberto Santos, a 34-year-old resident of the Rocinha favela. His typical method involved posing as an official or a local guide to deceive unsuspecting visitors. When located, he denied any involvement in the disappearance of the family from Rio Grande do Sul. During his interrogation, however, Gilberto spontaneously mentioned an accomplice he often worked with on scams in the tourist district. He referred to a man known only as Bigode, the mustache, who was adept at accessing restricted areas to facilitate petty thefts and cons. The information provided by Gilberto led investigators to Ronaldo Ferreira, a 42-year-old unemployed electrician who did, in fact, have a mustache. He had previously worked in maintenance for the Sugarloaf Mountain cable car. His intimate knowledge of the complex's internal structure made him a person of significant interest. Ronaldo was located at his home in Catumbi and brought in for questioning. At first, he denied knowing Gilberto or having any involvement with the tourists. However, when confronted with the evidence of the purchases and Gilberto's testimony, his story began to unravel. Under pressure, Ronaldo admitted to knowing the underground passages of the cable car system from his previous job, but maintained his innocence, claiming that despite his financial struggles, he would never harm an innocent family. The investigation gained new momentum when a third suspect was identified through Ronaldo's connections. Antonio Silva, 38, the owner of a small auto repair shop, was known for providing logistical support for petty crimes in the area. His workshop had previously been used to dismantle stolen vehicles. When investigators arrived at Antonio's shop, they found remnants of metallic adhesive tape and pieces of yellow tarpaulin in the trash. The materials were immediately collected for forensic analysis and proved to be a match for the products purchased in the days following the family's disappearance. The morning of September 19, 2014 dawned gray and overcast in Urca. Maintenance technicians for the Sugarloaf Mountain cable car began a routine inspection of the drainage galleries located beneath the boarding platform at Praia Vermelha. Their goal was to clear the grates before the heavier rains of the late Rio summer arrived. José Carlos, a technician with 15 years of experience, descended with his team to check a drainage box that had been causing problems. They carried powerful lights and tools for removing the debris that often accumulated in the tunnels. Upon opening the metal lid of the inspection box, José Carlos aimed his flashlight into the shaft. The beam revealed something that should not have been there. Two large, yellowish bundles compressed by metal straps rested at the bottom of the damp gallery. The odor that emanated from the space made the technician recoil instinctively. "There's something very wrong down here," José Carlos said to his co-worker. His years of maintenance work had taught him to recognize anomalies, but this was beyond anything he had ever encountered. The shape and size of the bundles did not correspond to common trash or construction materials. The maintenance crew immediately secured the area and alerted the cable car administration. Security protocols were enacted, barring tourists from the vicinity of the drainage box. Management contacted the civil police and the fire department simultaneously. Investigators arrived in less than an hour. The Urca precinct dispatched its most experienced team, accompanied by criminalists and technicians from the medical examiner's office. The scene was photographed extensively before any item was moved. The initial visual examination revealed that the yellow bundles were, in fact, two industrial tarps. Exactly the type that had been purchased in Copacabana days after the Nunes family vanished. The tarps were bound with multiple loops of metal straps, creating tight, hermetic packages, scattered on the damp floor of the gallery. Forensic experts found objects that made an immediate connection to the case of the missing tourists. A child's pink t-shirt, soaked in a dark burgundy-colored liquid, was carelessly tossed near the main bundles. A leather matira, a traditional satchel for carrying mate supplies, lay torn and stained with the same dark liquid. Nearby, a gourd and a metal straw, unmistakably gaucho artifacts, completed a scene that left no room for doubt about the identities of those connected to these items. The condition of the objects suggested they had remained in that damp environment for a prolonged period. The pink t-shirt showed signs of decomposition, while the leather of the matera was desiccated in some parts and rotting in others. The experts worked with extreme care to preserve all evidence. The burgundy liquid impregnating the fabrics was collected for laboratory analysis. The yellow tarps remained sealed on site until specialized equipment arrived for their safe removal. The experts noted that one of them had a tear through which bone structures were visible, confirming the worst suspicions about their contents. The second tarp had a smaller tear, revealing fragments that the experienced technicians immediately recognized as human remains. The removal operation took the rest of the day. 90 days after the Nunes family disappeared, The discovery deep within the Sugarloaf Mountain's underground gallery finally revealed their tragic fate. The leather matera that Eduardo had carried with such pride, filled with family tradition, had now become a silent testament to a brutal crime. The cable car administration immediately implemented new security protocols for all technical areas, ensuring that unauthorized individuals would never again gain access to the underground corridors. José Carlos, the technician who made the discovery, required psychological counseling to overcome the trauma. His 15 years of experience had not prepared him for such a disturbing find. That afternoon, all the material collected from the gallery arrived at the Rio de Janeiro State Forensic Crime Lab. The analysis would begin immediately, but everyone knew it would take days, if not weeks, to obtain conclusive results. Dr. Marcia Santos, a criminalist with 20 years of experience, took charge. She had worked on complex cases involving the concealment of bodies before, but the specific state of the yellow tarps presented unique technical challenges due to the time, humidity, and adverse conditions. The initial analyses focused on the personal items. The pink t-shirt was confirmed to be cotton. The burgundy liquid was identified as human biological material in an advanced state of decomposition, consistent with the time that had passed since the family's disappearance in June. The metal straps binding the tarps were compared with those purchased at the store in Tijuca. The manufacturing pattern, width, and material strength were identical, establishing a direct link between the suspicious purchases and the crime. Fabric fragments adhering to the straps were analyzed separately. Experts identified fibers consistent with a blue striped knit, a solid red knit, and a pink children's cotton. The colors and weave patterns perfectly matched the clothes the family was wearing in the last photograph taken on the station deck. The still-sealed yellow tarps were opened only in the controlled environment of the laboratory. The contents revealed human remains in a state consistent with 90 days of exposure to the conditions in the underground gallery. The forensic examination confirmed the presence of 4 distinct sets of remains. Biological material was collected for DNA analysis and comparison with samples provided by the Nunes family. Eduardo's brother, Marcos, had already provided a genetic sample to establish the necessary kinship. The DNA analysis would take several weeks, but the experts already had a moral certainty about the identities of the victims. The combination of personal items, clothing, and the circumstances of the discovery left no room for reasonable doubt. In parallel with the lab work, investigators reinterrogated the suspects, Gilberto Santos, Ronaldo Ferreira, and Antonio Silva. The discovery of the bodies completely changed the context of the investigation, transforming the missing persons case into an investigation of aggravated homicide and concealment of a body. Ronaldo Ferreira, the former cable car employee, was confronted with the evidence found in the gallery. His knowledge of the underground facilities placed him as the prime suspect for coordinating the concealment of the bodies in that specific location. Antonio Silva, the workshop owner, was also questioned again. Forensics confirmed that the materials found in his workshop were from the same batch as those used to wrap the bodies. The investigation revealed that the 3 suspects had known each other for years and had worked together on petty scams against tourists. Their usual modus operandi, approaching unsuspecting visitors near tourist spots and offering unofficial services, matched the anonymous tip received months earlier. The evidence allowed investigators to reconstruct the crime's timeline. The family had been lured into the underground galleries on the morning of June 21st, where the crime was committed. In the following days, the perpetrators acquired materials to wrap the bodies and returned to the location to complete the concealment. Pressed by the overwhelming evidence, Gilberto Santos finally confessed his part in the crime. He revealed that the initial plan was only to rob the family, but the situation had spiraled out of control when Eduardo tried to resist. According to his version, Ronaldo Ferreira had lost his mind and attacked the father. Gilberto's confession directly implicated Ronaldo Ferreira as the primary perpetrator, stating that Ronaldo had used a screwdriver to attack Eduardo when he tried to protect his family. The violence quickly engulfed the other family members as they tried to flee down the gallery's narrow, claustrophobic corridors. The grim logistics of the aftermath fell to Antonio Silva. His workshop served as the morbid stage where the tarps and bindings were prepared to conceal the bodies. He also provided the vehicle used to transport these materials to the cable car station under the cover of darkness. The crime scene reconstruction revealed harrowing details of the Nunes family's final moments. Lured into an area of the station that was difficult to access, they found themselves cornered the instant they grasped their captor's true intentions. Eduardo had tried desperately to protect his wife and children, but the confined space rendered escape impossible. When confronted, Ronaldo Ferreira confessed. Gilberto, however, initially denied the accusations. But his undoing was his own intimate knowledge of the gallery's complex structure, details only someone with his technical expertise could possess. This familiarity, which had been crucial to the crime's execution, ultimately incriminated him. Forensics confirmed that the drainage box where the bodies were discovered was so remote, even for staff, that it was rarely inspected. The location had been chosen for its near-perfect isolation. Only someone with insider knowledge could have selected such a hiding place. Finally, DNA analysis confirmed the identities of the 4 sets of remains found inside the yellow tarps. Eduardo Nunes, Patrícia Nunes, Bruno Nunes, and Lia Nunes. The genetic material provided by their family in Porto Alegre left no room for doubt. Marcos Nunes was officially notified of the death of his brother and his family. After 3 months of anguish and uncertainty, he finally had the answers he had been searching for, though they were not the ones he had hoped to find. The relief of knowing was irrevocably mixed with the definitive pain of loss. The leather matera, a special bag Eduardo carried with such pride as a symbol of his gaucho traditions and family identity, was found torn and stained on the gallery floor. The object that represented happy moments of family unity now served as silent evidence of a brutal crime, the chimarrão. Eduardo had prepared on the morning of the crime was still partially in its gourd when it was found. The drink, a symbol of hospitality and family tradition, had become a bitter reminder of the last moments of normalcy the family experienced before their trust was so violently betrayed. Investigations revealed the criminals had observed the family all morning before making their approach. They studied their habits, identified them as unsuspecting tourists, and carefully planned the time and place of their ambush to minimize the chances of being seen. This discovery also explained why the initial searches had been fruitless. Firefighters and rescue teams had focused on external areas, hiking trails, and public access points. No one had imagined that the bodies were hidden within the very structure of the station, in a restricted technical area. Dr. Roberto Cardoso ordered the 3 suspects to be indicted for aggravated murder, concealment of a corpse, and criminal conspiracy. The sentences, if confirmed at trial, could amount to several decades in prison. The public prosecutor's office received the complete police inquiry in October of 2014. Prosecutor Fernando Almeida, a specialist in violent crimes, took the case. The detailed reconstruction of events revealed that the crime had been premeditated as a robbery that was supposed to be clean and quick. According to testimony, the criminals had been observing tourist families for weeks, looking for targets who appeared to have money but were naive enough to accept offers of unofficial tours. In a later deposition, Gilberto Santos provided specific details on how the Nunes family was selected. The team jerseys Eduardo and Patrícia wore, along with the high-quality leather mateira, suggested they had enough disposable income to justify the risk. Ronaldo Ferreira finally confessed to his part in the crime but claimed they never intended to kill the family. According to his version, Eduardo became aggressive when he realized it was a robbery, attempting to disarm Gilberto to protect his wife and children. The situation, he claimed, rapidly escalated into violence. Ronaldo's confession revealed disturbing details about the family's final moments. Eduardo had fought bravely to protect Patrícia and the children, but the gallery's confined space and the criminals' superior numbers made his resistance futile. Bruno had tried to run but was caught before he could escape the area. Patrícia, according to the account, pleaded for her children's lives even after she was wounded. Lia, the 8-year-old girl, had hidden behind her mother, crying and begging to go home. Antonio Silva confirmed he provided logistical support after the crime. In his workshop, the criminals planned how to hide the bodies and erase evidence. It was his idea to use industrial yellow tarps and metal straps to create bundles that could be transported without arousing suspicion. Forensics confirmed the bodies had been kept at Antonio's workshop for approximately 48 hours before being taken to the cable car gallery. During that time, the criminals acquired the necessary materials and planned the best time to access the restricted area without being seen. The bodies were moved during the early hours of Monday, June 23rd. The criminals used fake ID badges and posed as maintenance workers to access the technical areas, bypassing the suspicions of the night guards. The investigation later revealed that the three accused had been planning more audacious crimes for months. An economic crisis and Ronaldo's unemployment had created financial pressure that motivated them to seek opportunities among the tourists visiting Sugarloaf Mountain. Ronaldo's inside knowledge of the cable car facilities was crucial. He knew exactly which areas were rarely inspected and how to access them without triggering the main security systems. His experience as a former employee had made the perfect crime seem possible. The leather mateira Eduardo carried had drawn the criminals' particular attention. Gilberto confessed they had imagined finding cash or valuable documents inside, but discovered only the mate gourd and straw. The disappointment over their meager profit made the crime seem even more absurd and cruel. In November 2014, prosecutor Fernando Almeida filed formal charges against the three accused, including 4 counts of aggravated murder, concealment of a corpse, and criminal conspiracy. The sentences could total more than 100 years in prison for each defendant. The trial of the 3 men began in March 2015. The case had gained widespread media attention, especially in Rio Grande do Sul, where the tragedy of the Nunes family had touched the entire state. Marcos Nunes attended the entire trial as an assistant to the prosecution. In June 20, exactly 1 year after the crime, the jury condemned all 3 defendants for aggravated murder. Gilberto Santos received a sentence of 95 years in prison. Ronaldo Ferreira was sentenced to 105 years, and Antonio Silva was given 78 years. Antonio Silva died in prison in December 2015 from complications of untreated diabetes. In January 20, Gilberto Santos escaped during a prison transfer. To this day, he remains a fugitive. Ronaldo Ferreira remains imprisoned, but his mental state is unstable. He has reportedly developed obsessive rituals related to the crime, repeatedly apologizing to imaginary photographs of the Nunes family. Following the crime, the administration of the Sugarloaf cable car implemented significant changes to its security protocols. All technical areas now have strict access control and continuous camera monitoring. The gallery where the bodies were found was permanently sealed after the forensic investigation. It has become a silent memorial to the tragedy, a constant reminder of the barbarity that can hide behind a veneer of trust. Marcos Nunes returned to Porto Alegre after the trial, but he never fully overcame the loss of his brother's family. He organized a foundation in memory of Eduardo, Patrícia, Bruno and Lia, focused on warning tourists about common scams. The leather matera that Eduardo had so prized was returned to the family. Marcos keeps it as a memento of his brother, but he has never been able to prepare chimarrão again. The object that once symbolized unity and tradition now carries the silent weight of a tragedy that could have been avoided. 10 years after the crime, Sugarloaf Mountain continues to receive thousands of visitors. Most are unaware of the tragedy that unfolded in the subterranean galleries of the station. But the security protocols implemented in its wake continue to protect families who, like the Nuneses, visit Rio de Janeiro in search of happy moments. The gaucho tradition of chimarrão, which Eduardo carried with pride, remains alive in Porto Alegre. But for the Nunes family, the ritual was interrupted forever on that June morning in 2014, when trust became a trap and a family outing became a tragedy that would forever mark all who knew Eduardo, Patrícia, Bruno and Lia.